Alright guys, top of 44, if you aren't there yet, we'll pick up where we left off yesterday. And remember, right where we left off, Santiago, the old man, has just hooked something. And remember, we talked yesterday about how most fishermen don't talk because they're afraid of any noise scaring the fish away. He's been talking a little bit, almost like an old man would to a little kid. And we talked about that a little bit yesterday, and that's right where we'll be picking up now. Kristen?
What page is it?
Very top of 44. He's taken it, he said. Now I'll let him eat it well. He let the line slip through his fingers while he reached down with his left hand and made fast the free end of the 2 reserve coils to the loop of the 2 reserve coils of the next line. Now he was ready. He had 3 40-fathom coils of line in reserve now, as well as the coil he was using. Eat it a little more, he said. Eat it well. Eat it so that the point of the hook goes into your heart and kills you, he thought. Come up easy and let me put the harpoon into you. All right? Are you ready? Have you been long enough at table? Now, he said aloud and struck hard with both hands, gained a yard of line and then struck again and again, swinging with each arm alternately on the cord with all the strength of his arms and the pivoted weight of his body. Nothing happened. The fish just moved away slowly, and the old man could not raise him an inch. His line was strong and made for heavy fish, and he held it against his back until it was so taut that beads of water were jumping from it. Then it began to make a slow hissing sound in the water, and he still held it, bracing himself against the thwart and leaning back against the pole. The boat began to move slowly off toward the northwest. The fish moved steadily, and they traveled slowly on the calm water. The other baits were still in the water, but there was nothing to be done. I wish I had the boy, the man said aloud. I'm being towed by a fish, and I'm the towing bit. I could make the line fast, but then he would just break it. I must hold him all I can and give him line when he must have it. Thank God he is traveling and not going down. You guys should have a pretty vivid imagery of what's happening here. Can one of you guys kind of describe it in your own words, though? He's hooked the fish, but what's going on?
Fish pulling.
The fish is like traveling all the way to like northwest.
The fish is traveling away, and then Nick? Yeah, the fish is pulling him. What does that tell us about the fish?
It's strong.
It's a big and strong fish. So he's hooked his fish. He's prepared for the battle because we know he has all of the extra lines of coil, 3 separate things of 44 fathoms, I think we were told. Review vocab word, how big's a fathom?
1 fathom
16.
6 feet.
Yeah, 1 fathom is 6 feet. He has 3 separate backups of 44 fathoms. He says he's lucky the fish isn't going down, so he's hooked the fish, but the fish is actually pulling him now. What will I do if he decides to go down? I don't know. What will I do if he sounds and dies? I don't know. But I'll do something. There are plenty of things I can do. He held the line against his back and watched it slant in the water and the skiff moving steadily to the northwest. This will kill him, the old man thought. He can't do this forever. But 4 hours later, the fish was still swimming steadily out to sea, towing the skiff, and the old man was still braced solidly with the line across his back. I know we've asked this before. How many of you guys fish or at least have been fishing before? There are at least a few of you. Okay. If you hook something, generally how long do you fight it?
Not too long usually.
Yeah, not too long. This guy has already been being towed by this fish for 4 hours now. So with the rope across his back. if any of you guys have had to actually fight a fish before to get it in, this guy isn't using that much energy. He's kind of waiting for the fish to tire out. But it's been 4 hours now. So some of you guys who've been fishing before can appreciate how long that must feel when you're just sitting in a boat. It was noon when I hooked him, Santiago said, and I had never seen him. He had pushed his straw hat hard down on his head before he hooked the fish, and it was cutting his forehead. He was thirsty too, and he got down on his knees, and, being careful not to jerk on the line, moved as far into the bow as he could, and reached the water bottle with one hand. He opened it and drank a little, then he rested against the bow. He rested sitting on the unstepped mast and sail, and tried not to think, but only to endure. So that kind of goes along with what I was saying. He knows how long it's been, but he's trying not to think of it. He's trying to think only of keeping this fish. Then he looked behind him and saw that no land was visible. That makes no difference, he thought. I can always come in on the glow from Havana. There are 2 more hours before the sun sets, and maybe he will come up before that. If he doesn't, maybe he'll come up with the moon. If he does not do that, maybe he'll come up with the sunrise. I have no cramps and I feel strong. It is he that has the hook in his mouth. But what a fish to pull it like that. He must have his mouth shut tight on the wire. I wish I could see him. I wish I could see him only once to know what I have against me. The fish never changed his course, nor his direction all that night, as far as the man could tell from watching the stars. It was cold after the sun went down, and the old man's sweat dried cold on his back, and his arms, and his old legs. During the day he had taken the sack that covered the bait box, and spread it in the sun to dry. After the sun went down, he tied it around his neck so that it hung down over his back, and he cautiously worked it down under the line that was across his shoulders now. The sack cushioned the line, and he had found a way of leaning forward against the bow so that he was almost comfortable. The position actually was only somewhat less intolerable, but he thought of it as almost comfortable. I can do nothing with him, and he can do nothing with me, the old man thought, not as long as he keeps this up. Once he stood up and urinated over the side of the skiff and looked at the stars and checked his course. The line showed like a phosphorescent streak in the water straight out from his shoulders. They were moving more slowly now, and the glow of Havana was not so strong, so that he knew the current must be carrying them eastward. If I lose the glare of Havana, we must be going more to the east, he thought, for if the fish's course held true, I must see it for many more hours. I wonder how the baseball came out in the Grand Leagues today, he thought. It would be wonderful to do this with the radio. Then he thought, think of it always. Think of what you are doing. You must do nothing stupid. Then he said aloud, I wish I had the boy to help me and to see this. You guys, I know the answer to this is yes, but I'll ask anyway. You guys ever do something? It could be a test. It could be helping your parents with some chores. It could be visiting some family members you don't see very often. You know how you guys sit through something you don't want to do, but as you're doing it, you're kind of trying to tell yourself, oh, this isn't so bad. This isn't that bad. It'll be over soon. And then time keeps dragging on, so you keep telling yourself that over and over and over again. That's kind of what the old man's doing here. He's trying to be positive, even though he's now starting to realize exactly how far he's being drug out and what kind of fight he's in for. Christian?
But just like one vacation we going to, I don't want to see the Cubs versus White Sox. I want to see the Cleveland Blues watch the Cubs.
Yeah,
But I don't like the fish.
well,
Yeah, so-
but sometimes you just have to tell yourself it's not that bad, don't
yeah,
you?
no, I don't like it. I don't even like them at all.
No one should be alone in their old age, he thought, but it is unavoidable. I must remember to eat the tuna before he spoils in order to keep strong. Remember, no matter how little you want to, that you must eat him in the morning. Remember, he said to himself. During the night, 2 porpoises came around the boat, and he could hear them rolling and blowing. He could tell the difference between the blowing noise the male made and the sighing blow of the female. They are good, he said. They play and make jokes and love one another. They are our brothers, like the flying fish. Then he began to pity the great fish he had hooked. He is wonderful and strange, and who knows how old he is, he thought. Never have I had such a strong fish, nor one who acted so strangely. Perhaps he is too wise to jump. He could ruin me by jumping, or by a wild rush. But perhaps he has been hooked so many times before, and he knows that this is how he should make his fight. He cannot know that it is only one man against him, nor that it is an old man. But what a great fish he is, and what will he bring in the market if the flesh is good? He took the bait like a male, and he pulls like a male, and his fight has no panic in it. I wonder if he has any plans, or if he is just as desperate as I am. He remembered the time he had hooked one of a pair of marlin. The male fish always let the female fish feed first, and the hooked fish, the female, made a wild, panic-stricken, despairing fight that soon exhausted her. And all the time the male had stayed with her, crossing the line and circling with her on the surface. He had stayed so close that the old man was afraid he would cut the line with his tail, which was sharp as a skiff and almost the size and shape. When the old man had gaffed her and clubbed her, holding the rapier bill with its sandpaper edge and clubbing her across the top of her head until the color turned to a color, almost like the backing of mirrors, and then, with the boy's aid, hoisted her aboard, the male fish had stayed by the side of the boat. Then, while the old man was clearing the lines and preparing the harpoon, the male fish jumped high into the air beside the boat to see where the female was, and then went down deep. His lavender wings, that were his pectoral fins, spread wide, and all of his wide lavender stripes showing. He was beautiful, the old man remembered, and he had stayed. That was the saddest thing I ever saw with them, the old man thought. The boy was sad too, and we begged her pardon and butchered her promptly. And so the old man just kind of has a lot of different thoughts going through his head now, and it's almost a contradiction in a way, because he's talking about how he can relate to these fish, and then in the very next sentence, he talks about butchering them and how good the meat was. And so he's already been battling long enough to where he just has a whole bunch of different memories and thoughts going through his head. I wish the boy was here, he said aloud again, and settled himself against the rounded planks of the bow, and felt the strength of the great fish through the line he held across his shoulders, moving steadily toward whatever he had chosen. When once, through my treachery, it had been necessary to him to make a choice, the old man thought. His choice had been to stay in the deep, dark water far out beyond all snares and traps and treacheries. My choice was to go there to find him beyond all people in the world. Now we are joined together and have been since noon, and there's no one to help either one of us. Perhaps I should not have been a fisherman, he thought, but that's the thing I was born for. I must surely remember to eat the tuna after it gets light. So there's another example of that range of thoughts. 3 sentences, 3 completely different thoughts. We talked about this before. He has to remind himself to eat. That's what he's doing. Because again, he knows he's in for a long fight. If he doesn't eat, he's not going to have any strength. Sometime before daylight, something took one of the baits that were behind him. He heard the stick break, and the line began to rush out over the gunwale of the skiff. In the darkness, he loosened his sheath knife, and taking all the strain of the fish on his left shoulder, he leaned back and cut the line against the wood of the gunwale. Then he cut the other line closest to him, and in the dark made the loose ends of the reserve coils fast. He worked skillfully with one hand and put his foot on the coils to hold them as he drew his knots tight. Now he had 6 reserve coils of line. There were 2 from each bait he had severed, and the 2 from the bait the fish had taken, and now they were all connected. After it is light, he thought, I will work back to the 40-fathom bait and cut it away too, and link up the reserve coils. I will have lost 200 fathoms of good Catalan cordell and the hooks and leaders. That can be replaced. But who replaces this fish if I hook some fish and it cuts him off? I don't know what that fish was that just took the bait. It could have been a marlin, or a broadbill, or a shark. I never felt him. I had to get rid of him too fast. Aloud he said again, I wish I had the boy. But you haven't got the boy, he thought. You have only yourself, and you had better work back to the last line now, and in the dark, or not in the dark, and cut it away and hook up 2 reserve coils. So he did it. It was difficult in the dark, and once the fish made a surge that pulled him down on his face and made a cut below his eye. The blood ran down his cheek a little way. But it coagulated and dried before it reached his chin, and he worked his way back to the bow and rested against the wood. He adjusted the sack and carefully worked the line so that it came across the new part of his shoulders, and, holding it anchored with his shoulders, he carefully felt the pull of the fish, and then felt with his hand the progress of the skiff through the water. I wonder what he made that lurch for, he thought. The wire must have slipped on the great hill of his back. Certainly his back cannot feel as badly as mine does. But he cannot pull this skiff forever, no matter how great he is. Now everything is cleared away that might make trouble, and I have a big reserve of line, all that a man can ask. Fish, he said softly aloud, I'll stay with you until I am dead. He'll stay with me too, I suppose, the old man thought, and he waited for it to be light. It was cold now in the time before daylight, and he pushed against the wood to be warm. I can do it as long as he can, he thought. And in the first light, the line extended out and down into the water. The boat moved steadily, and when the first edge of the sun rose, it was on the old man's right shoulder. He's headed north, the old man said. The current will have set us far to the east, he thought. I wish he would turn with the current. That would show he was tiring. When the sun had risen further, the old man realized that the fish was not tiring. There was only one favorable sign. The slant of the line showed he was swimming at a lesser depth. This did not necessarily mean he would jump, but he might. God, let him jump, the old man said. I have enough line to handle him. Maybe if I can increase the tension just a little, it will hurt him, and he will jump, he thought. Now that it is daylight, let him jump so that he'll fill the sacks along his backbone with air, and then he cannot go deep to die. He tried to increase the tension, but the line had been taut up to the very edge of the breaking point since he had hooked the fish, and he felt the harshness as he leaned back to pull and knew he could put no more strain on it. I must not jerk it over, he thought. Each jerk widens the cut the hook makes, and then when he does jump, he might throw it. Anyway, I feel better with the sun, and for once I do not have to look into it. There was yellow weed on the line, but the old man knew that only made an added drag, and he was pleased. It was the yellow gulfweed that had made so much phosphorescence in the night. Fish, he said, I love you and respect you very much, but I will kill you dead before this day ends. Let us hope so, at least, he thought. A small bird came toward the skiff from the north. He was a warbler and flying very low over the water. The old man could see that he was tired. The bird made the stern of the boat and rested there. Then he flew around the old man's head and rested on the line where he was more comfortable. "How old are you?" the old man asked the bird. "Is this your first trip?" The bird looked at him when he spoke. He was too tired to even examine the line, and he teetered on it as his delicate feet gripped it fast. "It's steady," the old man told the bird. "It's too steady. You shouldn't be that tired after a windless night. What are these birds coming to?" We'll go ahead and stop with our reading there. I do want you guys, one more thing with your journal, and that's to write a few sentences that kind of sums up what we read about today. Most of what we read about today, though, was the old man's thoughts. So kind of before you start writing, tell me, what were some of the things in his thoughts? What was he thinking about?
Fish.
Well, and not just the fish, but what about the fish? Anyone, well, what about the fish?